Hello and welcome to yet another webinar where we'll be talking about employment types in IT. We're going to be focusing mostly on the things that are actually available to you whenever you try to go into IT. What are the differences between different types of companies and what can you actually expect when going into those? And actually, agenda for today is, first of all, what are the different employment types? So I'll just give you a highlights from each and every one of them. Then I'll go in depth into those, which are startup, software house, product company, IT department, and then we'll have an optional Q&A. So we'll talk a little bit about what you can expect in the entirety of the market, and then we'll dive deeper. So without further ado, let's just go into what are the employment types. First of all, what are the options whenever you go into IT? You can go into startups, so essentially small companies that are yet still to prove themselves and are very, very dynamic, and you can learn quite a lot there. However, it is quite annoying to be there for prolonged periods of time due to uncertainty and actually risk of failure. Then you've got software houses, so essentially companies that their main product is selling the software that they're creating. Then we've got a product company, which has their own product that they're trying to develop. You can think like Amazon or Microsoft or any other software company that is actually developing software and selling this to their customers. And you've got IT departments in companies like banks or some other e-commerce companies, for example, that have in-house product that they are then trying to sell on their e-commerce store. And you can think of those as having their own IT department where you are actually responsible for just maintaining the product that they have. So let's dive into startups and what actually can you do in a startup. So a startup is a small to medium-sized company that is actually trying to prove themselves on the market. This is a company that, first of all, mostly do not have their own revenue, meaning that they are trying to survive on the money of the investors. And this is actually a very, very fast-paced environment. The goal of a startup is to actually try to prove that their product is something that the market will like and they will be able to make money off of it. It is essentially a race against time all the time, meaning that the quality of the code will not be high as it would be in another company that you could be going into, which is already established, because you're trying to actually survive before the money goes out. So startups are very, very unstable. But there also it means that if those are unstable and there is not much money to go around, first of all, there will not be enough time for you to be mentored by anyone in a really significant manner. However, it means that if you're independent, if you want to learn how to code and make some decisions, actually a startup is a pretty good place to learn because there you will have a lot of decision-making power. If there's not a lot of people who know how to code and you will be actually one of the smaller parts of the company, then it means that you will have a lot of decisioning power and a lot will depend on you, which is a lot of responsibility, of course. However, there are some people who like it, there are some people who don't like it. So it all kind of depends on the type of person you are. So startups are very, very fun to start. They are easier to get into because the founders are actually looking for just people to get the code out. The quality, as I've said, is not going to be high. There will be not a lot of tests. There will be not a lot of actual code coverage, code quality, or any of the stuff that normal companies actually care about, because here the most important factor is actually time. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of working in a startup. So for startup, you will have a lot of decision-making power, which can be a pro and a con, I can agree, if you don't want to make decisions by yourself. However, if you stick with it and if you make those decisions, then you will first of all get a lot of hands-on experience on actually writing the software and making some decisions on how it should look like and really accelerate your learning compared to a structured company where you will not be able to actually make some decisions. So I would see that this is actually a really, really good quality of a startup that you can learn quite a lot. And with that, there is a lot of independence. So if you're a person that really doesn't like being told what to do, you prefer to work actually on your own stuff, on your own pace, which is going to be quite a fast pace if we're talking startups, then of course a startup is for you, because you will be able to, or rather you will not only be able, you will be responsible for making the decisions on the fly and really trying to make the most of your time and the people that you are working with to actually build the product, which is very, very important. Then again, it is going to be a challenging work environment because actually you are constantly pressured, you are trying to really get to know your customers, you are trying to really fix the things on the fly, and there will be a lot of talks with the customers, with the founders, with the team itself, and it will be very scrappy, mostly for the time being of the company. And of course, whenever it's scrappy, whenever it's a startup, whenever we're trying to attract the investors, it means that we'll be having quite a lot of new technologies which are flashy. You can think AI, you can think new frameworks, you can think about all the new things that are coming out this year, next year, or last year. So essentially only new technologies is what interests a startup. You won't find a startup that writes their code, for example, in COBOL or any other old type of language, right? Only dynamic and fast environments. And of course, there's a potential of an unicorn. You can be working in another Uber, another Facebook. So there's, of course, always a chance for that. However, this is most likely not going to happen because 95% of the companies fail during the first 5 of being on the market. So this is actually a high risk company, but still, of course, there are high returns. Then again, let's talk about the actual cons of working in a startup. There is going to be a lot of fires. There will be low quality code, meaning that you will be actually responsible for fixing the bugs on the fly, trying to get them out of the way as fast as possible, because unfortunately for the majority of the time, there will be stuff burning, there will be things to do ASAP, and everything will be important and of high priority, because otherwise the company will go under. The work-life balance due to this is way harder. So if you're going into a startup, don't expect a regular 9 to 5, because most likely it will not be the case, and you will be actually responsible for quite a lot of work outside of your working hours, because the working hours will be very flexible in not the positive sense of it. Of course, there is the uncertainty part, meaning that you will never know whether this is actually going to work out and whether you will be actually able to really cash out your money. Because in the startup, there is a high possibility that you will not be getting as much money as you would in a normal job, let's say. However, you will be paid in stocks of the company, or rather some shares of the company itself, because it's too early for stocks for a startup. So it means that you will be getting some percentages for the company that we have seen in recent examples of NVIDIA have really worked out well for the programmers, where they have gotten quite a lot of payouts thanks to their staying with the company. However, for the most part, it is not really going to be amounting too much for the majority of the market, because startups unfortunately fail quite often. Then the risk of company failure. The idea of the founders can be not good enough. Some people could not like it, and you won't be getting enough money to really survive as a company. And of course, with being so fast-paced and being a young company, there's going to be less structure and resources for learning, meaning that you will be learning mostly on the fly, trying to really fix things as they come up, and not really in some theoretical manner, meaning that there is quite a lot of space to really learn, but not learn like in a classroom environment or doing some courses or anything like that. You will have to learn everything during the work that you're doing. And that's pretty much it about startups. So to sum it up, a pretty good environment if you like fast-paced things. If you want to really fully commit to being a programmer, then yes, startups are for you. However, as I've said, you will need to be a very independent person to really make it within a startup. Then let's talk about software houses. So a software house is a company that is already established. It could also be a startup in their early days of life of a company. However, software houses for the most part are selling software as a product, meaning that you come to them and you ask them to do some type of software for you. Whether it's a website, it's an application, or anything of sorts, that's where you go to a software house. If you don't want to have an IT department of your own, you can always rent the programmers from a software house. They'll create a solution for you for any price that they set up depending on the complexity of the project, and they will actually do the software for you and you will be the owner of it. But of course, there are some pros and there are some cons to working in a software house. The first pro, I would say, so a good side of working in a software house, is the fact that you can start projects from total zero. So as I've said, the other companies are coming to a software house to build out stuff for them. What it means is that you start projects from scratch, and then you need to talk out the architecture, what are the requirements, how will it look like, and this also is very much in track with writing things in a new technologies. So this is very nice whenever we are talking about projects done in a software house, because this means that you will be starting quite a lot of things from total scratch, which is very, very important skill for a programmer, and you will learn a lot about architecture of things, about proper solutions for different use cases, and how to actually implement them in real life. Then there is the fast track to senior title. And why is that? A software house is a company that makes the money based on the programmers that are being used for their project. And if you have a programmer who's a senior, then you can actually get more money out of your customer, because you can tell them, yeah, there are only seniors working on this project. But in software houses, for the most part, the payment bands are actually quite wide, meaning that you get your senior title very fast. However, it will not be the same senior title as in other product type companies, for example. Because there, it makes sense in a software house to actually give you the senior title, but not really give you the money for a senior. So you can get this title very, very fast. However, in my experience and in my friend's experience, actually a senior from a software house is not always equivalent to a senior from a product company. And yeah, there are a lot of projects within a software house, meaning that you will be able to switch between those if you're, of course, good enough. If you get bored, if you want to change something up, if you are interested in another technology. So actually, there's quite a lot of things that you can move around, you can change, and actually adjust to some other things that you are more comfortable with. And then there's, of course, this kind of maybe unethical, but yeah, but I like this at least. There's an easy way of double employment, meaning that you can work on one project during the day and then on the other one during the evening. Because there could be some time differences, and the company that you are working for could be multi-continental, so they would be working in different time zones. So in a software house, it is very, very easy to actually get a double employment and actually get the double amount of money for the work that you are doing. And then, of course, there is the possibility of doing big projects for big companies. So even if you didn't get into Amazon, Microsoft, Netflix, or any of the big tech companies which are currently on the top, it still means that some of those could be using software houses to actually write out some code for them. Why is that? They are trying to optimize costs, or maybe they just don't have enough people who are knowledgeable in a certain technology, and it's just cheaper to rent them out from a software house. So you could also write out in your resume that you have worked for such a big company. And it will be actually true. So that's very nice whenever we're talking about software house. However, of course, there are some cons to working in a software house. First of them is the bench. So the work in a software house is project-based, meaning that if there is no project, then you actually don't have anything to work on. So you go onto a so-called bench. And for the most part, if you spend on this bench at least, let's say, a month or about 4 weeks, then there is a high possibility that you will be let go. Why? It doesn't really make sense for a company to still hire a programmer that is not doing anything, because programmers are costly. So that's why it really doesn't make sense for them to still maintain your pay and have you there when you are not really making money for the company. So that's why there is this risk of bench always, right? For example, the technology that you're using is not as popular, or maybe you are just not good enough and some other people have gotten the chance to work on the projects where you are benched. So that's quite annoying whenever we're talking about software houses. Then your senior title is rushed. So as I've said before, unfortunately, in a software house, it is easier to get a senior software title, but senior software engineer title. However, it is quite often that it is rushed and it doesn't really reflect your abilities. So if you try to change your job to another place, then there's a high possibility, high chance that you will actually be getting some lower, let's say, work title, due to the fact that you didn't get as much experience as it would normally be required for a senior role in a company. And then with a project-based work, there is unfortunately the case where you would like to work more on a project that is long going, and you can actually learn some domain-specific knowledge, which is just fancy wording for saying that you stay for a longer part in a single project, and you can really get into the nitty-gritty details of the technologies used and the use case. The use case being, for example, e-commerce or any sort of thing, or any website or any other type of project that you are making. So the starting over part can be pretty annoying for some people, and if you would like to have more stability, then unfortunately software houses are going to be quite annoying for you. And then you are going to be, for the most part, being treated worse than in-house teams, because you are just a contractor, you are just an outside force that is not really fully respected by the company itself that you are doing project for. You are just a mercenary for them. So that is also something to keep in mind when talking about going into a software house. With that being said, let's go for a product company. So whenever I'm talking about product company, I mean a company that has their own product that is done via software. Any SaaS company, for example, AWS, Amazon, Netflix, that are selling their software as a service, then you are talking about a product company. So those companies actually have been long established. This is essentially a next level for a startup, right? Or rather the goal for a startup to become. So a product company is an established company that is counting their years way into the future. They're investing into their employees. They have long-going projects. So let's say that having an employee stay there for a prolonged amount of time is actually very beneficial for them, because it is a knowledge that you can't get anywhere else, and you really want to have as much of a context as possible for those cases. So they are very much investing into the employee, and it is an established company, meaning that it's way safer and it's way more easy to actually stay within a product company and learn things related to your technology, because you are going to be using this for quite a long time, because those companies are not really changing things around a lot, and they value stability and having their own product stay the way it is and then evolve slowly, then rather doing some drastic changes. Then let's talk about growth of a product company. There is a structure in place. So the company has been around for quite a long time, think about 5-10 years, even more in some cases, where the product is already established, the people have been working there for quite a long time, the leadership is mature, they know what they're doing, and actually you are getting quite a lot of return from it in the form of being a structure in place. A lot of fires have already been put out, and you already know how to behave based on the previous experience of the company itself. Second of all, there will be mentorship. It means that the people in there actually are evaluated on the amount of mentoring that they are doing. For example, if you want to move from a mid software engineer to a senior software engineer in such a company, you are also going to be evaluated on how you are teaching other people on how to code, how to behave in a company, and how to adjust themselves to the company environment. So mentorship is something that is very easy to get in a product company. The stable environment is also a very nice to have, because let's say in product companies, for the most part, if you are not going to be going into, for example, let's say Apple or Microsoft or any of the big companies that are very, very hard on the employee because they are really focusing on being the best, but you still can go into 1 billion a year company and still have a stable environment where you know what to do, you have your contract of employment, and you start your job at 9, end it at 5, close your computer, and there's actually nothing more for you to do, because everything is very stable and there are no really big fires happening. In such companies, there's also a clear way to move forward, because they have trained a lot of employees and they know what to expect on certain levels. So whenever we are talking about any sort of promotion or maybe getting a raise, then you know exactly what to do in order to get it. So that's also a very nice bonus of being in a software company that is actually well established in the market. And then, of course, the company invests in you because it makes sense for them. They are trying to plan for 10 years ahead, 15 years ahead. So they want to have employees that are staying with them for such prolonged periods of time. For example, I've been in a product company because actually I have started within a product company. So it is actually a very nice place to get an internship at, because they will be doing quite a lot to have you stay there, because for them you are an investment. So they will put quite a lot of money and quite a lot of resources to actually make you as valuable as possible for them, because for them it makes total sense, because they want you to stay at least a couple of years before you move on. However, of course, there are some downsides to being in a product company. First of all, there could be way too many processes. As the companies get bigger and bigger, at one point there is this big machine of processes, and if you want to have something done, then you will need to wait, for example, a month for it to be approved by some people like 2 or 3 levels above you. So this can get quite annoying whenever we are talking about speed. So actually with the certainty and the security actually comes some slowness. So you need to be prepared for that. Then there's boredom, because if you go into the part of the company that is only for maintenance or some other stuff, then actually there will be not a lot going on, meaning that most likely you will get bored. And that's actually perfectly normal, and so people prefer it that way, to only have a 9 to 5, pretty calm, pretty basic, and then you just do your work and then you head home. Then we get to soulless corporate. Whenever we are talking about companies that already have thousands of employees, yeah, we are talking about corporations that are quite soulless. You will get a lot less feeling of being within the company, and you will be way more anonymous than, for example, in a startup where everybody knows each other. So this is also something to be prepared for. The technologies that you will be using will be older, because the code was written when it was a startup, for the most part, the core basis of the code, and then it was being built upon. So for example, if you are talking about Java, there's a high possibility that within a product company, you will not be using the newest version of Java. Right now I think it's 21, but more likely the Java 11, because it is costly to really migrate the entirety of the code base, which can be millions of lines of code long, to the new version of Java, and it is going to be a long process. So that's why you will be working for the most part with all the technologies, not as fancy as in startups or even software houses. And then the slower development. I'm not really talking only about the code development, but also about your personal development, because there are processes in place. And for example, there can be a case where you need to be, for example, 2 years on a certain seniority level before you're even considered for a promotion, which is quite slow, let's be perfectly honest. So this is also something to be taken into consideration whenever you're thinking about going into a product company, because there it is going to be quite annoying if you want to move fast, because there's a high possibility that it will be a bit slower than you would in other types of employment. Last but not least, let's talk about IT departments. So those are companies that are doing their thing on their own, but they do have an IT department because they have a mobile application, they have a website that needs to be maintained. You can think of those, for example, as banks or any other type of place that would have a need for mobile or any other type of application. Let's talk banks for this example, right? So IT departments, they're easy to get into because they are not really looking for some cutting edge programmers, let's be perfectly honest. It's a really chill place with already established processes, right? I would say that within IT department, it is very calm. It is quite easy work to do because you will not be doing any groundbreaking changes. There could be some processes in place to really make sure that what you're doing is secure. For example, in a banking company, you always want to make sure that everything is very secure due to the fact that the risk is high. Also, that's why it is very slow paced and you don't need to worry about much. You can think of going into IT department of a place as a sort of a corporate retirement, because in there will be parts of the corporate, but it will not be as annoying and as big as it would be in a very big corporation that is making their own product. So I would say that this is for the people that want to have just chill time whenever they are doing their work. However, of course, there are some cons. There's not a lot of space to grow within an IT department. There will be not a lot of innovation, new technologies, or anything like that. The real boredom is actually big case for the IT departments, because you will not be doing anything groundbreaking. There will be no pressure, and you will be just doing things and releasing stuff maybe once or twice a year. You are not going to be the priority of the company, meaning that you will be just one of the departments, and not everything is going to be relying on the IT department of a company. And then the code base can be very old. If you go into a banking space that I'm the most familiar with, that's why I'm mentioning it quite a lot, then always be prepared to have some code base that is old, even 20 years something, that has not been changed for this time, because it is dangerous and it works this way. So if it works, don't break it. So that's essentially the true rule that is being used in IT departments. And of course, this is unofficial, but still you'll be asked to fix some printers for the most part if you are related to IT by some people from the other parts of the company. So that's pretty much it about all the types of employment that are there in IT. I'm hoping that you have learned something, and if you have any more questions, then head on to the School DevLaunch group where I'm doing more of those. I'm also replying there all the time, so if you are more interested in doing some stuff around IT, want some help, want some community, or want to join our resume review, which will be next week, then head on to the link which is in the description. Thank you very much and see you next time.